want to go back to making serious videos. But come on, Mr. Black and White, posturized, young Bob Dylan lookalike. We don't know anything about you.
Okay, well, you asked for it. Here are 5 facts about me. First off, I play the guitar. I always wanted to play the violin, but because my parents didn't like the idea of endless hours of squeaky practice, they got me a cheap catalogue nylon string guitar. So I learned to play that instead. I'm alright. I teach a few beginners, but I've also got a large hoard of instruments, ranging from keyboards, saxophone, flute, violin, bongos, banjo, harmonica. I don't know how to play all of them, however. I never quite got all the time. I inherited them from my sister when she gave up playing, and other ones I've just accumulated. I had one violin lesson when I could afford to do so and had the time, and the violin teacher said that I was the most natural violin player she'd seen. However, I didn't have any more money or any more time, so I stopped. I like photography. That's one of the things I do. I have a Nikon D80 and a couple of old lenses. A lot of the pictures that I use in my slideshow videos are my own. I've been lucky enough to get a few relevant pictures now and again. You may not think it to look at me now, but I actually used to be quite physically fit. I used to be quite athletic and do a lot of cycling, Tour de France style cycling, to the point where I had done things like at a juvenile level, represented my country, won some national titles and regional titles. Quite a few of the people that I used to race against and occasionally beat are now actually riding in the Tour and doing very well. Through this, I actually managed to get interviewed by a cyclist called Chris Boardman, who was a British cyclist and had done many things. He held the hour record, which is the furthest distance travelled in an hour. He also has worn the yellow jersey several times and won Olympic medals. So yeah, I managed to get interviewed by him, which was very strange. Like you, Peach, I don't drink. I never have. Never particularly liked the taste when I've tried it. Never particularly liked the idea of it to begin with. So I simply don't drink. However, I do like going to parties, meeting up with friends, etc. The only difference being is that the following morning is I can remember everything that's happened and embarrass them all. This will probably sound a bit strange, but I have successfully run myself over. When I was quite a bit younger, after I got my licence and what have you, I drove around a few universities when I was applying in the car. I used to drive a Volvo 440 turbo diesel, for anyone who cares. Drove quite a few hundred miles, went to several universities, had a look round and came home, no problem. However, after I'd come in and eaten, I got a phone call from a friend saying, would I like to come out and play pool? In order to get to where we played, which was a couple of miles away, I got back into the car. Now, just before I'd gotten home from my trip around the universities, the fuel light on the car had come on. This wasn't a problem because I knew that the amount of fuel in the tank would be more than enough to get me to the pool hall and back again. So I set off and drove up the hill from my house, across the motorway bridge which is there, and carried on up the hill until the car stuttered and stopped. Now, not thinking, I got out the car and had a look, because there'd been a slight problem with the alternator. I thought perhaps the battery hadn't been charged properly, and it was an electrical problem. I hooked up a battery pack and started tinkering to try and get the car going, when a kind passerby stopped and asked whether he could help. After a couple of attempts at starting the car, he said it didn't sound like there was anything particularly wrong with the engine firing, and he asked the question, was there any fuel in the car? At which point I obviously thought, Now, whilst I was on the flat, this wasn't a problem. I could have easily gotten to the pool hall. However, seeing as the fuel was taken from the front of the tank, and I was on a hill which pushed all the fuel to the back of the tank, I couldn't start the engine. So, I'd had cars break down on me before, properly break down on me, and the remedy always was get out and push. So naturally, I opened the driver's side door, leaned in, and released the handbrake. This was all with the idea that I could gently roll the car back to a turning point, turn the car round, and head back down the hill to a fuel station. However, I've looked it up. The car weighed somewhere around a metric ton. It was on wheels and it was on a hill. Now, back then I was reasonably strong, so I lasted a couple of seconds of slowly going backwards with the weight of the car pressing on me, until it became quite rapidly obvious that I wasn't strong enough to hold the car. This occurred to me when I was hanging from the driver's side door, rolling backwards down the hill with my feet off of the ground. The fella who'd stopped to help me gave chase down the hill after the car. I'm not entirely sure what he planned to do about it, but there you go. So I managed to roll down the hill backwards towards the motorway bridge, whereupon I would most likely have gone through the wooden fence next to the bridge and straight onto the carriageway below. I realised this at the time and thought that that wasn't the best thing to happen, so I had to put my feet down quite quickly, getting clobbered by the door, and throw myself headfirst into the cabin. I grabbed onto the handbrake with both hands and pulled it on as hard as I could. The car did stop, and I didn't end up going over the motorway. However, by the time I pulled myself back up out of the footwell, I was just in time to see the man who'd stopped to help me come hurtling down the hill, unable to stop himself from running. Luckily, he managed to run the speed off and, slightly out of puff, came back up the hill to where the car was. The only thing that he could say, because it was obviously a very stupid thing to do, was, of course, the hydraulics won't work when the engine's not running. I knew that the subtext of it was, I don't know why you did that, and this is all that I can think to say. My response was a simple, yeah. Anyway, at his suggestion, I then remained seated in the car and rolled backwards with my foot on the brake, like a sensible person. I managed to make it to pool in the end, and lost. Right, well, those are 5 facts about me. If I choose to tag anyone, then your name will be in the description box.